You know, if you have heard me preach before in the month of June, and most of you have, you know that the theme, at least for June and maybe on into the summer and maybe on into all the rest of the Pentecost season, is going to be the theme of journeying with Jesus. It's not that I can't think of anything else to say. It's that that's what's going on in the Gospels. That at this moment in the cycle of Gospel readings, after all the folderol of the death and resurrection and all that stuff, we settle into a journey with Jesus, journeying through the countryside with his disciples, each week picking up one piece of who he is, and what the calling is that he gives to his disciples. Now, I was thinking about this. This is not my sermon. This is a little aside. This is a sermon I'm not preaching today. While I was brushing my teeth this morning, this came to me, and I thought, God, I should preach about that sometime. We say that Jesus and these disciples, and we find out today in today's gospel, a whole bunch of women, went from village to village throughout the town throughout the area of Galilee. And they went from village to village, town to town. And we say they did this for 3 years. How does that be possible? How did it really work? I mean, where did they stay? How did they decide where they were going next? Who did the cooking? Was there somebody in charge of making arrangements? Did he have advanced men or advanced women? And for 3 years, just trucking around the countryside. So I don't know the answer to that. But I just wanted to let you know I'm going to preach about that one day. If God gives me the answer. Or at least some hint. I don't know, we'll see. But today, that's where we are. We're in this third week of this journey through the countryside with his disciples and with these women and with some people going through. And the disciples have been called, and now they're set out with him, and they've been told something of what the message of the kingdom is. And now, as they're still trying to figure out who he is and what this kingdom of God is all about, they go from place to place. And you know that 2 weeks ago they went to Capernaum, and he healed the servant of a centurion, of a pagan. The first healing at Capernaum is of a pagan. Because, he says, this pagan had more faith than any of the Jews who were there. And then he goes on to name. And he resuscitates a dead body. Because he is so moved with compassion by this person's mother's grief. And it's the grief that breaks open the power to raise new life. And so today he moves on to yet another place. And between last week's lesson and this week's lesson, there's a passage in which John the Baptist's disciples come to him and say, John's in prison. And John sends his disciples to ask if he is the one to come, or should they wait for somebody else? And he says, essentially, well, go back and tell John what you see. That the lame walk, and the blind see, and the deaf hear, and that the good news, that the poor have good news preached to them. Just go tell them what you see. So he gets to this town today, and he is invited by a Pharisee for supper. It's not a big deal invitation. This is not like a banquet. It's not an extraordinary thing. It's just this Pharisee has heard apparently about him and thinks it might be interesting to have him come to supper and chat with him a little bit. So he goes to the house, and they all sit down for supper. And there is this woman who comes in, who's not invited, who is known to the people who live in the town as a woman of ill repute, as they say, whatever that means. We're not exactly told. And she comes in kind of quietly, we can imagine, and she's carrying this jar of ointment. Now, how is this possible? What lies behind this? Why would she come in? Well, it appears that the reason she comes is because she's heard about Jesus. She's heard, on the one hand, that he is a totally non-judgmental person. That the first healing he does is for a pagan who doesn't even know God. That this is a man who can resuscitate the dead just because he loves people, because his heart is open. He's heard that the lame walk, and that the blind see, and the deaf hear, and that poor people just like her, have the good news preached. And she understands in this a message of forgiveness for herself. She is well known in town as a sinner, and she knows herself deeply to be that sinner. And she thinks that she is locked into this identity for her entire life because she imposes it on herself and because it's repeatedly imposed by the town and the social structures which tell her, you're a sinner, you're useless. And yet here is this guy coming along who has set people free in unimaginable ways, in ways that are beyond human intelligence. And she says, if those people can be set free from their afflictions, from their sinfulness, then I am free as well.